Now that we covered all the redirection techniques we can use, let's talk about something which is kind of related with redirecting. Navigation guards. A guard is something you might know from other frameworks and their routers. A typical guard is, for example, used when you don't know whether the user is authenticated or not, and there are some parts in your application, some routes, you only want to allow the user to visit if he is authenticated. With the React router, you might need to have to think about these guards in a new way. For example, in the block component here, in the block container, where we set up the routing for new posts and so on. Since in the end, all we're doing here is just rendering some components, the route component, the switch component. If we want to make sure that new posts can't be reached, we can simply render this conditionally. So let's say we have some auth state here. I add state, and that state auth is false initially. Now what I can of course do is I can go down into my render statement and either now use a variable which returns null or that route, or to use the quick and dirty inline solution, I can check if this state auth is true, in which case I want to render that route, otherwise I return null. Now there is no way the user can access new post if he's not authenticated, so if the auth state is false, because this route is basically unknown then because it's not rendered. So now if I save this, and keep in mind the default state now is that auth is false. If this is the case and I click on new post, I'm redirected back to the starting page, because what essentially is happening here is that redirect kicks in here. As I said, from here basically just is used as a prefix, and therefore it catches everything which isn't caught before and redirects me to posts. This is a guard. It's totally different than we use guards in Angular or any other framework, but in the end, this is how you can conveniently control whether the user is allowed to access this page or not. Of course, an alternative to this would be to go to the guarded page, and inside component.mount here, you could also check if the user is authenticated, and it of course depends on the application from where you're getting that information. But then you could also check that here and simply use this props history replace posts if user is unauthenticated, for example, like that. So this also is an alternative, using component.mount to essentially redirect the user if it's not true. This is how you work with the React router. This is how I want you to think about it. You control a lot of it by the way you render its components. And if the route isn't rendered, you can't reach that route. The definition isn't rendered, so the component connected to it can't be loaded. This is how you have to think about it and how you have to structure your application. Wrap your head around this. This is really crucial to get right and crucial to understand.